Well, thanks so much, Gerald. It's great to be here. Thank you, Deanna, Rick, Jerry, everybody. So I'll talk for 15 or so minutes to kick things off, and then I hope we'll have a lively discussion, as you said, led by Rick. So we're five plus years into the real crackdown in Hong Kong. The Beijing authorities promulgated a national security law a little more than 5 years ago, and that was wide, sweeping, draconian, promised at the time to net only a very few people, and in fact has seen over 200 people arrested, and most convicted since then. It's part of a whole net of laws which have criminalized dissent and turned Hong Kong, as I think most of you watching know this, from one of the freest, most vibrant cities in Asia into a shell of its former self in many ways. Not every way, I should say. The stock market is booming. There's lots of capital being raised. So this isn't I'm not trying to present a one-sided picture, but I will primarily concentrate today on the crushing of dissent and try to update people as to what's happened since the national security law, which I'll just refer to as the NSL, came into effect. So since 2019, so I guess if we go back a year before the NSL, there have been over 10,000 people arrested in Hong Kong, of whom roughly 2,000 have been convicted and jailed on political charges. I'm talking about here. Charges hang over many, most of those other 8,000 people. Well, I should say arrests have been made. In many cases, travel documents have been taken, and sometimes charges have been filed, sometimes they haven't. So there's just a real threat, like kind of a Chinese official described it as the NSL as a sword of Damocles hanging over the people of Hong Kong. And certainly for those 7 or 8,000 people who've been arrested but not charged and can't travel, that's a pretty severe threat hanging over them. Obviously, for the nearly 2,000 people who've been jailed, of whom we think a little more than 700 are still in jail. Obviously, it's been a very tough time. We have seen most independent newspapers or the major pro-democracy newspapers shut down. We've seen pressure on civil society. So organizations like Amnesty International, the prisoner advocacy group Hua, and others have shut their Hong Kong offices. We've seen Hong Kong's ranking in press freedom fall dramatically. Reporters Without Borders, which does, I would say, the best, or certainly among the best of the international press freedom rankings, started off in 2003, ranking, which is when their ranking started, putting Hong Kong as number 18 worldwide, among the freest places on earth in terms of press freedom. As a time when I was working there, and it was not perfectly free, but it was very free. In its latest ranking, RSF, Reporters Without Borders, has Hong Kong as number 140 out of about 180 countries and territories. So, I mean, Hong Kong has just plummeted in press freedom rankings. We can go through a number of other rankings, and in every single one, Hong Kong has gone from among the most open, freest places in the world to among the most repressive. Uh, the situation is, of course, most severe with people who are facing trial and imprisonment. The trial of Jimmy Lai, who I worked with as a board director at Next Digital, which published Apple Daily, continues. We can talk about that more in the Q&A if people are interested. But Jimmy is awaiting a verdict now. He's been in jail in December. It will be 5 years. I think December 4th marks 1,800 days of consecutive captivity for Jimmy. Most of that time he's been in solitary confinement. And I wouldn't want people to forget my other 6 other colleagues from Apple Daily, all senior editorial people, all of whom have pled guilty, essentially being held hostage until the end of Jimmy's trial and his sentencing. They've all been in prison for more than 4 years. And the list goes on. There's the so-called Hong Kong 47, who were a group of legislators, academics, basically good citizens trying to run or ran an election primary, trying to winnow out the candidates to have the strongest pro-democracy slate that was going to compete in elections in September 2020. For their pains, they were arrested, held, most of them held throughout the trial. 45 of the 47 were found guilty. They're now serving terms from 4 years to 10 years. Well, some of them have been released. The good news about being held, if you can call it a good news, uh, about being held during a trial without bail is that when the trial was over, several of them were pretty much sentenced to time served. People like legislator Claudia Mo among them. But others like Professor Benny Tai, one of the foremost academics in Hong Kong, was sentenced to 10 years in jail. And so I think that's the kind of minimum we're looking at for Jimmy Lai. Other trials are still going on. We're expecting kind of the last big show trial for the Hong Kong Alliance people. This was the group that organized the June 4th commemorations in Hong Kong every June 4th, of course, to commemorate the Tiananmen Square killings of 1989. The three leaders of that, Chow Hang Tung, a barrister, Lee Chuk-yen, a unionist, and Albert Ho, also a lawyer, were expected to stand trial starting this week, but that's been postponed for 2 months until January. So it's hard to find much in the way of hope in Hong Kong, or it's hard to find anything positive. We have an election coming up on December 7th for the Legislative Council, but only pre-selected candidates, so-called patriots, which the Chinese Communist Party means somebody who supports the Communist Party, somebody who is pro-China but anti-CCP is considered an enemy of China and not a patriot by the Chinese Communist Party. So it's not much of an election. The last time there was, during the first of these so-called patriots only election, record low turnout, only about 30% of eligible voters voted. And it's interesting because authorities now, this week, and I guess for the next couple of weeks, are trying to drum up support because they'd love to see a high turnout, which they think will legitimize the results of the election. So there are all sorts of festivals and carnivals and kind of feel-good events that are designed to spur a high voter turnout. Yeah, it's hard to really know what else to say. We could talk about the schools where kindergartens are now having, communist flag raising ceremonies and national security days down to the kindergarten level, and occasionally goose stepping marches. Churches where we're seeing the so-called sinicization of religion, which is led by, well, it follows the mandate of Xi Jinping, which is to make the churches increasingly intertwined with the Chinese Communist Party. So even in Hong Kong, we're seeing the People's Republic of China, the five-starred flag, next to an altar in a Catholic church. We're seeing incidents like Muslim clerics being taken out to Xinjiang, where, of course, we've seen the largest concentration, the largest roundup of civilians, the largest civilian internment since the Nazi period. And the Muslim clerics and if, officials are being shown a Potemkin village in Xinjiang and coming back and saying everything is fine. So we're seeing an increasing twinning of Hong Kong with the mainland. Perhaps in the Q&A we can get into the economic side of it. I guess for now I would just say that perhaps the most interesting incident is the whole controversy over the disposition of the Panama Canal. I think all the Americans watching this will be aware that President Trump said that he wanted to get the canal back from Chinese ownership. Excuse me, and the canal was owned or controlled by a Hong Kong-based tycoon Li Ka-shing and his C.K. Hutchison. he struck a very good deal to sell it to a group of foreign investors. And after decades of the Chinese saying that this was purely a private consideration, that there was no question that China had any security interest in the Panama Canal, the Chinese have reversed course and have put heavy pressure on Li Ka-shing and C.K. Hutchison to sell the canal ownership to a consortium, including significant Chinese interests. So I mentioned that less for the specifics of the Panama Canal and more to show it as an example of the kind of interference we're seeing on the part of Beijing, on the part of mainland in Hong Kong business. And of course, Hong Kong has always thrived precisely because it's not subject to mainland interference. Its legal system was outside of the mainlands. It's a common law tradition. It didn't have the kind of political pressure from the CCP that we saw in the mainland. And yet that's all changing. It's changing from the trial of Jimmy Lai to even the wealthiest tycoons like Li Ka-shing. So I think at the risk of boring that, well, I think I won't risk boring you any further with a monologue. So I think I'll stop here and open it to Q&A. I guess led by Rick Hornick.
Well, yes, Mark. It's not so much a there we go. I don't think so much as a danger of boring us as simply depressing us even further than we already were. One of the things I'd just like to start off with is, can you talk a little bit about your group? Because I mean, who is keeping track of? I mean, this is quite a laundry list of things, and I know you've left out a lot as well, just for brevity's sake. But how do you gather what is your organization? How do you gather this information? And what are the problems that you face in doing that?
That's okay. That should keep us going for a while. So, well, I didn't want to give an advertisement, but but since you asked, the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation was set up in 2022. We're a U.S. registered nonprofit with offices headquartered in Washington, D.C., but with a significant presence in London. We do a lot of research, original research. So we've done some work, for example, on Hong Kong's role in fueling Russia's war machine by acting as a smuggling center for high-tech goods. And we could talk more about that, but we've not done significant original research on that. We've done, I think, some groundbreaking research on prison conditions in Hong Kong and on the treatment of people after they've been released from prison. We're lucky to have just a variety of people who work for us, on staff and on contract. So that helps us keep track. I've got to give credit to both the U.S. and UK governments, both of which come out with annual, or in the case of Britain, semi-annual reports on basically collating from open source materials what's going on in Hong Kong. I also need to, really give credit to my Hong Kong colleagues. Two of them have bounties on their head. They've each been slapped with $1 million Hong Kong dollar reward. If you drag them in, they're subject to successful prosecution. I mean, it's pretty. I kind of joke about it, but it's actually quite chilling. One of them, Francis Hui, was the first Hong Konger to get asylum in the U.S. Chloe Chung lives in the UK, moved there when she was 15, she's 20 now, is subject to the bounties only for the work that she's done for us. And in fact, just today, she was awarded a Global Magnitsky Young Activist of the Year award for really what she's been through. And it's just, it's chilling. We didn't, I focused mostly on what's happening in Hong Kong, but I think one of the dangers, why should, besides the fact most of us on this Zoom, are familiar with and probably very, very fond of Hong Kong. I think the world needs to care about Hong Kong as well, because I think it's being used as a test bed, as a laboratory by Beijing to see how far it can go in terms of harassing and threatening dissidents abroad. And I think Chloe, Francis, and about dozen other Hong Kongers who are subject to bounties are some of the victims of that. And again, these are people who are exercising their free speech rights that are guaranteed in Canada, Britain, Australia, the US, and other free countries. And they're living in those countries and they have these bounties on them. And I really wish we'd, as much as I appreciate all the work that the British and US governments do to keep track of what's going on in Hong Kong, I think we need a more robust response in terms of pushing back against these kind of predations.
Yeah, by the way, the chat is open, so anybody who wants to send in a question, use that function, please. Yeah, actually, that was going to be one of my questions because yes, you've talked about what's happened to the people in Hong Kong, but there are quite a few stories about these bounties and more than just bounties, absolute plainclothes people harassing. There's a lot of harassment. I mean, what is the response of, especially I think the British government, because it seems to be one of the a lot more of a problem there in terms of harassment of these exiles. What are they doing? What are they saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I should say the U.S. has been the most robust, and I think the FBI and others have been pretty aggressive at Chinese intelligence and harassment operations in the U.S., although not always successful. I mentioned my colleague Francis Hoy testified in a federal case against a Chinese or an alleged Chinese agent in Boston at the beginning of this year, and he was actually found innocent. So God bless the jury system, but it doesn't always
Hmm.
get the results you want. But I do have to give U.S. authorities credit for again acting
Hmm.
robustly. Britain, it's much more of a mixed picture. It seems that the Starmer government, first Labour government in a while, but unfortunately following the policy of its Tory predecessors, uh, especially post-Brexit, seems very concerned about angering or alienating China. It seems to believe that the small amounts of trade that it has now with China, about 100 billion pounds, a little more than 100 million US a year, 100 billion, sorry, is somehow going to move the needle on the British economy. And so I think that Britain has been really reluctant to push back. So we mentioned trials. A very interesting trial is coming up next March where an official at the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office in London, and the ETOs are kind of quasi consulates. We've got, excuse me, three of them in the US, San Francisco, DC, and New York. I think there are about 14 around the world. The one in London seems to have been at the center of an espionage operation that was harassing dissidents and, in some cases, dealing with commercial disputes. Really kind of an army unto itself. So it'll be very interesting to see if this trial goes forward and what it reveals about Hong Kong and Chinese intelligence operations in the UK, harassment operations. Um, yeah, it's a kind of a discouraging picture in the UK. On the other hand, we've got a couple, I think 150,000 or so Hong Kongers have moved to Britain in the last 5 or 6 years, joining tens of thousands of others. So, yeah, really lively, robust Hong Kong community
Um, yeah, it's the pretty frightening, some of these things. The long arm of the CCP. Um, is this having any effect on the status of Hong Kong in international affairs? I know there were efforts in the U.S. Congress or discussion. In fact, some people have been arrested in Hong Kong for calling for an end to Hong Kong special trade status. I mean, has there been any attempt to use that as leverage against the Hong Kong government and the CCP?
Yeah, good question. I'd say the US is the only place where there's any move, and our organization has worked on legislation that would shut down the economic and trade offices. We think these basically are basically bonus embassies, bonus consulates for the PRC. a bill that would have done that, passed the House 413 to 3 last year. Didn't quite get over the line in the Senate, but I think it's something to work on. I do think the economic and trade offices are probably the best target. It's interesting because Hong Kong is a separate member of the World Health Organization. Taiwan's not a member at all. So China gets Hong Kong and the mainland. It's a member of the World Trade Organization. It's a member of a lot of organizations. It's kind of a tug of war now. I think it'd be hard to kick Hong Kong out, but I also don't think that they're expanding their international reach. I think, the work that we and others have done about Hong Kong's, yeah, they've really gone to the dark side. And when it comes to especially the sanctions busting activities, I mean, we have found evidence. When I say we, I mean the research that we've done at the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation. We found, uncontrovertible evidence of hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion in the first year after Russia invaded Ukraine of semiconductor exports going through Hong Kong to right to Russia, dual use technology. Similar material going to Iran, which is going into Iranian drones, which are being used in the Ukraine. So I mean, Hong Kong is being used as an essential waypoint to kill Ukrainians. And it's not just that it's bad that hundreds of Hong Kongers are in jail. It's like this place is becoming a major national security threat. And we've just come out with with work looking at Canadian technology that's going through Hong Kong. And I think we can be pretty certain that there's European technology going through as well. So, this is like, I mean, Hong Kong's always been a freewheeling kind of money laundry place where, things go in, come out the other side. You don't really, necessarily know where they're coming from or where they're going. But when it comes to the kind of increasing global conflicts, and notably the Ukrainian war, I think we've got to look really closely at Hong Kong. And I think people are getting that message, and it's making it harder for Hong Kong to be taken seriously as a legitimate international player. And I should just finish on one related note, which is that we've been working with Congress on legislation that would focus on Hong Kong's financial system and designate Hong Kong. There's legislation that would designate Hong Kong as a primary money laundering concern, and it would be a lot harder for illicit financial flows to go through if that bill passes.
A good question from Isaac Kong, who's a PhD student in Syracuse, working on contemporary Buddhist community in Hong Kong after 2019. And he's wondering, given that many of these religious groups played an active role in the events in the 20 to 25 period post 2019, do you think eventually Beijing will turn Hong Kong into a place where religious freedom is lost? I mean, I was wondering, is the Catholic Church, is there arrangement with Beijing? Does that extend to bishops and cardinals in Hong Kong as well?
Good questions. I can't completely answer them. To Isaac's question, yeah, yes. I mean, I'm actually the least familiar with the Buddhist situation in Hong Kong, but I'd say that religious freedom is being increasingly squeezed in Hong Kong. So I would expect to become more and more like the mainland.
Mhm.
The Catholic Church, which had been among the leaders in the pro-democracy
Yeah.
movement, notably under Cardinal Joseph Zen, who's in his mid-90s now, is no longer acting as cardinal. Was a just again a real leader, and there are a lot of historical reasons why the Catholic Church in particular, as opposed to the Anglican Church, was so prominent politically, even before the 1997 handover. But the current leadership is much well, they're just they're much more supportive of Beijing. They're certainly not pro-democracy, and so there's a real split within the church. And I don't know the answer to your question, Rick, as to whether or not they specifically fall under the arrangement with Rome. I believe they do, but it kind of almost doesn't matter because the church is clearly taking guidance from Beijing at this point. Not all believers are, but the hierarchy of the church is working very closely with Beijing. There's no question of well, there's no evidence of any widespread kind of underground church, although I think that there are a lot of people who have pro-democracy beliefs in the church, but they're not in the position that
Yeah.
of Joseph Zen or Cardinal Zen, and they're not getting that kind of leadership from that Zen provided. And he's, as I said, he's in his mid-90s. He has been arrested and convicted. He was not jailed. He went to Pope Francis's funeral, but he had to get special permission. He doesn't have his own travel documents. Apparently, wasn't able to give any interviews while he was there. So, it's a pretty
Yeah.
tough situation.
Yeah. Gretchen Gould has an interesting question, and I think an important one, so that we don't just despair. Is there anything that individuals can do to support Hong Kong? I mean, is there write your congressman, boycott Cathay Pacific? What is there? Do you have sort of action items for people who write into your organization?
Yeah, well, feel free to contact me. We could take this offline. I mean, we're very focused on Congress and on Parliament and on government action, and not just Congress and Parliament, but at least in the U.S., the administration, trying to get. I mean, we make no secret about it. We're in favor of sanctions, for example, and there were sanctions put on six Hong Kong and Hong Kong related Chinese individuals earlier this year. I also think, I mean, there are ways of supporting individual prisoners. I think one of the, perhaps the only thing worse than being a political prisoner is to be a political prisoner and think that the world has forgotten you. And we've spotlighted, scores of political prisoners. We try to celebrate their birthdays and other major events on social media. There are groups, we're not leading this, but there are groups who have letter writing campaigns and others to support individuals. Honestly speaking, it's tough in the sense that you have a Hong Kong government which is, just unresponsive. You've got a Chinese government which is unresponsive. So I think to, try to speak out. Definitely. We've had a lot of congressional support. So Senator Rick Scott just led a group of 30 something senators calling for President Trump to work for the release of Jimmy Lai. If one of your senators who's one of those people, please support her or him. I think we're going to have something similar coming out of the House, and it would be good for constituents to let their Congress member know that if they have supported something, you support it, and if not, that you'd like
Mhm.
to see that support.
Yeah, maybe Deanna can help arrange for you to leave a link or something where people could, because having covered authoritarian regimes for a good bit of my career, the one thing that people really need is a sense that they aren't forgotten, and
Yeah.
hope exists, even if only in the support of people, and even if only in knowing that other people believe the way you do.
Yeah.
Um,
So if I can just, because we shouldn't just despair. In every free territory-wide election from the beginning of, the waning years of the British period, 1991, the first Legislative Council elections, until the last free elections, November 2019, District Council, roughly 6 out of 10 Hong Kong people voted for the pro-democracy candidate. And, well over 50%. And okay, hundreds of thousands of people have left, but I still got to believe that at least half the people, maybe it's 7 out of 10 now because they really appreciate what they lost. Most Hong Kong people want freedom and democracy. And, they might differ on, which candidate they'd support or whatever. I don't think most Hong Kong people and all the evidence we've seen and all the evidence we've seen from the government, which is still trying to stamp out dissent, suggests that Hong Kong people haven't given up. I believe that freedom is in the Hong Kong DNA. And I think, having, events like this, writing, going to Hong Kong film festivals that are, kind of, I don't know, I guess more free films as opposed to propaganda films. I think all this shows not just the political prisoners, but the people of Hong Kong. They haven't been forgotten.
Carolyn Caldwell asks about Jimmy and the status of his case. It's been postponed again, or at least we're waiting for the verdict. Is there some reason to be hopeful that it was postponed? I mean, you and I talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about, and she mentions an uptick in lobbying. Trump maybe raising it with Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
What are the
Yeah. So,
odds there?
well, it's going to be a guilty verdict, but let's dial back a bit. Jimmy was first arrested August 10th, 2020. So that's more than 5 years. As I said before, he's been in prison be 5 years in December. The trial was supposed to last 80 days. It lasted, I think it was supposed to last 80 anyway. It lasted twice that length, 155 days. Jimmy was on the stand for 52 days. Honestly, I think they don't quite know what to do with him. And
Mhm.
it's clear they have to find him guilty. It's a handpicked, no more jury trial under the national security law, even though it was guaranteed under Hong Kong's constitution. Um, so you've got three handpicked judges. I kind of imagine maybe they're off at the Iowa Fiction Writers Workshop trying to come up with a fictional reason why you need to convict Jimmy. I mean, they have to write a judgment that's drawing on common law traditions that's going to find a guy guilty of something that he didn't do. And that was collusion with foreign forces to, I guess, hurt Hong Kong and China. Uh, they didn't break Jimmy. He's a guy that has, great international support. And above all, he's a man of principles. He's a man of Catholic faith. Before he converted to Catholicism, he was a man of great principles. So I think they don't really know what to do. The case finished, the closing arguments finished at the end of August. I mean, well over a year behind schedule. We thought we'd get a verdict in the first half of October. Now we're thinking December or January. I don't know when the sentencing will be. Again, I think we're looking at a minimum 10 years of sentence. Now, to what you and I guess Carolyn were alluding to, there's a lot of behind the move, this, curtain movement, it seems. We believe that President Trump brought it up with Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping and his team noted it. I think it's an unnecessary irritant in Sino-US relations, but it's also bad for China. Jimmy's in his late 70s. He's in bad health. If he dies in prison, he's forever a martyr, and I don't think China needs that. I mean, people still remember Liu Xiaobo, the
Mhm.
only Chinese Nobel Peace Prize laureate, dies in Chinese custody. It's not a good look. They've broken the Hong Kong democracy movement, at least as an active movement. Apple Daily is not going to be publishing again. So let the guy go. Let him join his family. He's a British citizen. Let him go back to Britain. So I think both British and US officials are working with the Chinese behind the scenes. I'm not privy to any details. I do note that President Trump wants to go and have a summit in Beijing in the first half of next year, and it would be a nice kind of gift to give Trump to let Jimmy out. But so I remain hopeful, but I don't think there's anything imminent.
Um, yeah. How would you, putting back your editor's hat on, you worked at both the South China Morning Post and the Standard, ran them both. Um, you know what's going on, and you follow the Hong Kong journalism scene. How would you rate the coverage there? I mean, it's interesting because I follow a lot of what the South China Morning Post does on China, and many of it is pretty out there. It's not they don't always seem to be pulling punches about things that are happening in China. Um, but anyway, so what's your assessment of how not just the two English language papers are doing, because they China never really cared that much about what was going that stuff, but also Chinese language.
Yeah, I don't know that I can give a fantastic insight on that, except there's a lot less room than there used to be, but there's not no room. So In English, there's also the Hong Kong Free Press, which
Mm.
covered Jimmy's trial, or at least ran wire copy of Jimmy's trial all 155 days, I think, which the South China Morning Post probably ran at about 1 out of 10 days.
Mhm.
You have organizations like Witness, which just cover the courts. And I mean, in Cantonese and in very straight up, but I think, filling a niche. You still have, some places with a modicum of independence, like Ming Pao. But you've also got Dagongbao and Weibo, which are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So, it's just there's a narrowing of debate when people get, for example, there's a big, as I said, when people get a little too far, too critical, the government comes back and basically threatens them kind of implicitly with arrest. So there's a big controversy over this so-called Northern Metropolis, which is a big development right on the Shenzhen border, which is going to cost many, many billions of dollars. And, obviously has environmental consequences. And the criticism got to be a little too heated, so the government calls it soft resistance. And the next step after soft resistance is they come with hard handcuffs and take you away. And so usually people get the message. And so, I mean, the sad thing to me is that there seems to like everything seems to be taken to a national security level. If the government doesn't like something, then it basically, threatens you under this panoply of legislation that it has. So, not a lot of room for debate, which again is sad in a place like Hong Kong that was so free.
Carol Peterson notes, as you mentioned the Hong Kong Free Press, and I was remiss in not. One way you can support Hong Kong is to support the Hong Kong Free Press. I don't know how they manage to walk the line that they do, but they've done continue to do a remarkable job. I mean, one of the most interesting things to me in those sorts of situations is that, yeah, the sort of Damocles, as you mentioned, there is no hard white or blue or red, I guess, hard red line that if I go one step over this line, I'm going to go to jail, or they're going to shut down my news organization or my what. It's always left to be sort of self-censorship, which is and usually works out that people come up a lot short of the red line for fear, and I assume that that's what's happening in Hong Kong as well.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, look, it's been happening. I mean, I saw it in the newsrooms when I was there 20 years ago. People were looking over their shoulders. I mean,
Yeah,
it was a pretty free place, but it wasn't like the media in New York either. But I think the sort of Damocles, I always often think of Professor Perry Link, who I'm honored to have on the board at the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation. He wrote that great essay, wow, more than 2 decades ago, called The Anaconda and the
mhm,
Chandelier.
yeah,
And it's like try to answer the question. I mean, for those of us who are old enough to remember the Soviet Union, and you go to Eastern Europe and it was all gray and there was no food in the restaurants or the grocery stores. And you go to China, or let alone Hong Kong, it's just so vibrant. Go, it doesn't seem like a totalitarian place, but Perry's analogy was it's like there's a big, you're at this really nice dinner party, you're having champagne and canapes but up there in the chandelier is this snake. And every once in a while, the snake reaches out and grabs someone for a reason that maybe you know and maybe you don't. And sometimes it just kind of shifts around and moves a little bit. It doesn't have to do too much. And
right.
people get the message.
Yeah, no, actually, my previous foreign posting before China in '85 was Warsaw from '81 to '83, and my first couple of months in China, I'm going, wow, this is great. I don't have, there aren't thugs following me everywhere. Anyway, yeah, it's easy to forget about the anaconda in the room. Um, can we talk a little bit about business, especially expats in China? I know that the Chinese government is trying more and more to use Hong Kong as a financial entrepot, I guess, for lack of a better term. But how are Western or non-Western sort of other foreign businesses viewing China now as a place to do business?
Yeah. Look, as I say, we have to be really honest. It's boom times right now. Hong Kong will be the world's biggest IPO market. Yeah, there's some technical reasons. Not all so great. Companies that can't list in New York or in
Mm,
London go to Hong Kong. I mean, Chinese companies will go to
mm,
Hong Kong. There's a lot of mainland money. There's a lot of desire to drive and build Hong Kong as a financial center. I think after a couple of years, when maybe even longer, when the mainland wasn't really sure what it wanted out of Hong Kong, I think it's now decided that it really wants to put it forward as an international financial center. And I think I mean, we should probably have another session in a year or so when things are clearer, but I'm fascinated by the fact that Hong Kong seems to be a crypto center. It's crypto is illegal in the
mm,
mainland, and yet they're bolstering it in Hong Kong. And
mm.
I could be very cynical and say, that, crypto certainly facilitates money laundering and a lot of other dubious transactions. I don't know, but there's a lot going on. The financial conferences that Bloomberg just had one at the beginning of November. I'm not happy to see a lot of senior global financial people going there, but that's where the money is right now. I should
Mm.
add, I mean, a word of caution. Basically, in the last either certainly since the NSL, the National Security Law, 5.5 years ago, the Hong Kong market has returned a little more than 1% a year on average. I mean, 'cause for the first 4 years it was underwater. So last time I looked, it was up 30% or so this year. Great. But in fact, the long-term record, or if you go back to the handover,
Yeah.
the S&P 500 is I think 4 or 5 times the return of the Hang Seng Index. I think there's a real discount on Hong Kong, and I think that discount is going to remain, perhaps become more pronounced, because you have less and less good governance, you have less and less good regulation, and shareholders get fleeced again and again and again. There's a reason that Hong Kong stocks are relatively cheap because investors don't have much protection. So right now, this is a boom year. I'm a skeptic for the long term.
But are Western financial institutions still leaving China? I mean, I know it was going on for a while. Everybody was sort of thinking, well, maybe Singapore, but I know the problem has always been there's no good alternative to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Everybody's got
No,
their problems.
I think Hong Kong is at least for the moment back. If we've had over $30 billion in new IPOs this year. I mean, that's a lot of fees for lawyers and investment bankers. So I think for the moment seems okay. Again, I would caution, I think that foreign businesses are going to find many of the same problems they find in the mainland, which is, arbitrary arrests, detentions, exit bans. We haven't seen that yet in Hong Kong, but I worry it's just a matter of time. I mean, I'm not
Well,
wishing that. I'm just saying
yeah.
that's the direction Hong Kong's
But
headed.
they do have extradition. I mean, with China, so it's
Now
not
they do. Yeah,
the safe place that it used to be.
right.
People, I know people who have left, for that very reason.
Yeah,
Uh,
I should say, I mean, we talked about business, but universities, I mean, the universities are being gutted. I mean, I got my PhD at University of Hong Kong, and in the history department, that's been decimated. I think four of the vice chancellors, the top position, the chancellor's the chief executive, four of the seven vice chancellors have resigned in the last couple of years. I mean, academic freedom's a thing of the past, which again is really sad because Hong Kong had certainly some of the best universities in the region, and in many cases, world-class universities. That's slipping away.
is it affecting non sort of liberal arts faculties as well? The sciences and that sort of thing?
I don't know. I mean, University of Science and Technology in particular had a really good start, and I know the Chinese have been successful in bringing some overseas Chinese back home, and including some really good science people. So let's see.
Yeah. Well, we still have most of our participants with us, so I guess you didn't bore them. A little,
It's your good questions,
it's
Rick.
a little depressing, but there's not not a lot of bright spots around right now. Anyway, Mark, I really do appreciate you, taking the time to do this and bring us up to date. And I really will have Deanna make give some pass along any information you have about what people might do, or if people want to get in touch with you directly.
Sure. I mean,
So
We're just thecfhk.org,
Mhm.
THECFHK, like Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong. Um, I'm M. Clifford at the CFHK.org, and yeah, be happy to hear from anybody. Thank you for your interest, and look, all isn't lost in Hong Kong. There are a lot of great people there. Nobody knew the Berlin Wall was coming down a month ahead of time, and there it went. So history
Mhm.
throws up strange things. We just keep fighting.
Well, yes, and that's the old Lu Sun quote. At first there is no path in the countryside. Hope is like a path in the countryside. First there is no path, and then many people walk in that way, and a path appears. So we have
Good.
to have hope.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Rick. Thanks
Okay.
everybody for watching. Appreciate it.